What a lot of people don't seem to understand is that whether or not the ICE officer made physical contact with the vehicle doesn't actually matter. And in fact, if ICE officer Jonathan Ross did make physical contact with Renee Good's vehicle at any point, it actually helps to prove that he was never in any imminent danger, because it proves that the vehicle wasn't actually traveling at an angle nor velocity to do so. That would in fact show that the worst case scenario for Ross actually happened. And nothing happened. He wasn't knocked down, he didn't lose his footing, certainly nothing warranting deadly force. In fact, he was still able to aim and shoot his gun 3 times, including while running alongside the vehicle. In other words, you cannot say that his life was in danger from getting hit by the car and that he got hit by the car and was fine. Which he is. Him getting hit, and yes, I use the term loosely, would actually hurt their case. And by the way, the administration knows this, which is why they started pushing the idea so hard that he was at the hospital recovering from injuries, which no one saw him receive. In fact, because we know that his body was already positioned to the side of the vehicle by the time he first pulled the trigger, this physical contact would actually prove an even bigger issue for him. Because he could only argue that he was in fear of imminent danger coming from the car if the danger were imminent. And in fact, at that point, the danger would have largely, if not completely, passed, and he would know that because he would have already made contact with the vehicle, so he could no longer fear that he was going to be hit by it again. The administration, by the way, has figured this out, and they know that people are going to realize sooner or later that the fear of getting lightly clipped by a slowly moving vehicle doesn't warrant this sort of reaction. And this, by the way, is why I believe they're trying to suggest that he had trauma from a previous event involving a car, because they want you to think that maybe he was inappropriately afraid of a slow-moving car. Ironically, this admission, if it were true, would actually make them liable for putting someone who is mentally unwell and unfit on duty. And it still makes him wrong in this case. But ultimately, this is all just to muddy the waters of the court of public opinion, because they know that legally they are completely in the wrong. We know that they know that because they're preventing Minnesota law enforcement from investigating the case. Not only does CBP policy specifically say that officers should avoid standing directly in front of or behind a subject's vehicle, and that they should avoid intentionally placing themselves in positions where they have no alternative to using deadly force. Deadly force is not permitted to be used to stop the fleeing of a subject. And even more specifically, it's prohibited for them to discharge their firearms at the operator of a moving vehicle, unless, again, it is specifically believed that that could stop an imminent threat. However, they even include a warning about the hazard of uncontrolled conveyance. Because the thing is, when you shoot the operator of a vehicle, they are unlikely to just stop the vehicle. In fact, it's more likely that they will lose control, or that having been hit, their body will actually tense up and floor the gas, which is what might have even happened in this case. The fact is, law enforcement would never actually be trained to shoot a driver that they believe is going to hit them, because number one, if they have the time to draw their weapon, aim, and fire, then they have time to step out of the way, and number two, because if they were to do so, they're just as likely, if not more so, to get hit by that vehicle, possibly at an even higher velocity. Basically, the worst choice an officer could make, even if they did believe that they were in imminent danger in that moment, was to draw their gun and shoot. Add to that just about every single ruling, of which there are several, in any similar case, where law enforcement are basically always ruled against for shooting at a motorist in a moving vehicle, even if they are standing in front of the vehicle and it's moving towards them. Why? Because it pretty much cannot be argued that if you have time to draw, you don't have time to step aside. And they are more than likely to be heavily responsible in the creation of the totality of the situation that would put them in that position in the first place, which means it's their fault.